And now for the last look. You might think there could be no place more remote from war-torn Ukraine than the rarefied Davos. But I want to highlight one notable effort to bridge that gap. The Viktor Pinchuk Foundation teamed up with the Office of the President of Ukraine to put on a series of moving exhibits and lectures at Ukraine House here in Davos that highlight the human toll of the war. The project is called Ukraine is You. Bjorn Geldhoff, the artistic director of the Pinchuk Art Center in Kyiv, told us that the title is a plea to the global community to support the country, materially and otherwise. The power of the plea is achieved through its organizers' refusal to look away from the horrors of the war. I want to warn you that some of the images you are about to see are graphic. This one is a photo featured in the exhibit of a man mourning next to the body of a woman hit during a barrage of shelling in Kharkiv in July. The blue of his shirt and the yellow of her dress, Geldof says, are like a dismembered Ukrainian flag. Some of the exhibit is dedicated to stories we know, like the alleged war crimes in Bucha, but much of it would be unfamiliar to viewers. For example, you may have seen sweeping images of the damage to apartment complexes in cities like Mariupol. But have you seen Saltivka, a neighborhood in Kharkiv? Before the shelling began in February, it housed about 500,000 people. Now, a tiny fraction of them live here. A resident told the BBC, "It's like Chernobyl." And you may have heard of Ukrainians in captivity in makeshift Russian prisons inside occupied territory. But it's another experience altogether to see what looks like blood on the walls of this detention center in Kherson. Here, occupants reported being beaten and interrogated, according to Geldof. They were forced to memorize the Russian national anthem and Russian poetry that was written on the walls, and they were forced to recite them on command. Ukraine is You is more than just a plea for a certain kind of tank or missile defense system. It's an effort to document and therefore to remember. And it brought to mind a conversation I had earlier this week with a very inspiring woman, Alexandra Matvichuk. She is the Ukrainian human rights lawyer who last year accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of her organization, the Center for Civil Liberties. It's a group that's been working to shore up democracy in Ukraine for the past 15 years. Since Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, Matvichuk has interviewed hundreds of survivors and documented Russian violence in the country. She's heard accounts of rape, of torture, of people being compelled by their captors to write with their own blood. And despite all that she has seen and heard, despite the Russian invasion itself, she is not without optimism for the future.
We will be able to say to our generation, to next generation, that, okay, it was a period of temporal law disorder when nothing worked, when even human rights lawyer like me, when I asked what Ukraine need, answered, provide Ukraine with weapons. But we fix it. And we hold Russian war criminals accountable because rule of law is essential and justice is possible, even though delay in time.
Bearing witness and bringing justice, all in the midst of this terrible war. Thanks as always to the World Economic Forum for the opportunity to moderate the conversations you heard today. And finally, thank you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.